give us your understanding of what is a classic version of a robbery.
How do you deal with the prosecutor who is now presenting you with pictures or surveillance?
Leave me alone is not so much of a problem, but man, I'm gonna kill you, man.
So there's different ways to look at a robbery, and there may be other resolutions that aren't so highly penalized with a strike consequence.
I have this approach that I have developed at the firm where basically we're using a 3-step method.
Do you ever look at a case and think, this is a lost cause?
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thank you very much for tuning in and listening to another episode of Stay Out of Trouble Tuesday. We took a little summer break to give our lawyers and our video team a little bit of rest, but we're back with more content and more fun videos. And today, I'm gonna show you one of the videos we recorded just for fun while we were out enjoying 4th of July with my very good friend and my brother-in-arms, Mr. Alejandro or Alex Martin from Fresno, California. I hope you like this video. I hope you continue to support our channel. We're not getting paid for putting out any of these videos, you guys. We just want to bring you helpful information, some knowledge that you can use to educate yourself, to learn about things that we're passionate about, and stay out of trouble. Yeah, what are we gonna do here? We're gonna cook some chicken, Alex?
I want to cook some chicken, but we got some law on our mind.
All right, sounds like a good plan. Let me show you what we got. We got right here some Jamaican jerk chicken that's been marinating for 24 hours.
Yes, sir.
It's a recipe I got from a dude in Jamaica, Mr. Biggs. Mr. Biggs is a really cool guy. Here's the sauce that Biggs makes. And I don't know if you knew this or not, but my wife and I, we got married in Jamaica. So it's always held a special place in my heart. And one of the things I love about Jamaica, apart from the people and the music and just a really great vibe, is I love jerk chicken. And this dude, Biggs, is like Jamaica's top jerk chicken roadside chef. And so I met him on my honeymoon, and I met him a year ago on our 10-year anniversary. So I got some really cool moments drinking some cold beers with Biggs and hitting him up for his jerk chicken recipe. And here it is. All right. Now we're cooking for a big party for 4th of July, so we're gonna have a lot of chicken, a lot of people. So I'm gonna have to use my Traeger. It would be better if I use my Weber instead. So Alex, you know, you and I were chatting earlier about how today is obviously a holiday. We got the rest of the weekend in front of us, but come Monday, you and I are going to be getting some calls.
A lot of calls, probably a lot of scenarios of things that happened this 4th of July. Maybe some people took things a little too far and didn't necessarily follow the rules, but which rules did they not follow?
I'm thinking about what kind of calls I'm going to get come Monday, and I'm thinking naturally we're going to get some calls for probably folks getting a little over exuberant, maybe some arguments inside the house, unfortunately with the family. Always sad to see that because you and I know, love our families very much.
Right.
I try to fix people and their problems when they come to us with domestic violence cases and other types of cases affecting family life. But I was thinking we're going to see some retail crimes, some retail theft, probably some Estes robberies.
Estes robberies are a tough one because it does kind of change things.
Yeah, it's an unusual crime in California, and a lot of people don't know this, but California has this special subset of robberies. Alex and I were chatting with our significant others before we started cooking this chicken over here, and
It's looking pretty good.
it is looking good.
Looking good.
I agree with that.
It's not burnt. It has character.
It's gonna be time to flip it in just a moment. But so Alex and I were talking to our significant others, and we were explaining that California has this unusual type of robbery where even if you do not directly use force or fear in order to obtain somebody's property, you could nonetheless be prosecuted for robbery if you prevent the owner of the property from defending it or make an attempt to reclaim it. And we'll explain in detail. Alex, you've done a lot of Estes robberies, I'm sure, both in your past as a public defender and obviously in private practice. Give us your understanding of what is a classic version of a robbery, with like a definition and a couple of examples.
Well, just to go with the example, it would be any scenario. It doesn't have to be retail, it doesn't have to be an actual store, but it's an area where a lot of times we look at things like a theft, something low level, someone has just taken an item, maybe they won't see me, and it can quickly rise. I look at it as the difference. It can quickly rise from a small theft to a strike, a robbery, because the person decided to do something else when they were being chased, when they were trying to be captured by the owner of the store.
Well, I think, yeah, and I think to start with, the classic definition of a robbery is theft that is committed by using force or fear. We're going to give you a good example of what a classic robbery is. Imagine right here we have a thermopan, by the way, an excellent grilling thermometer. And let's say
on the link below.
We might put that. Maybe I'll get a free one since this one's been laying in the sun and is giving me an error message.
It's coming back.
Finally working. All right.
Coming back.
And I'm going to put it in my pocket for the purpose of this illustration and also to keep it away from heat. So we'll give you an example of what a classic robbery is and how it differs from theft. So let's say, hypothetically speaking, this $150 digital thermometer is laying right here behind me. And Alex, my good friend, while I'm not looking and enjoying this beer, decided to steal it. At this point, Alex has taken possession of the thermometer with intent to permanently deprive me of my ownership interest, meaning intent to steal it. Has he committed a robbery? Alex, come back into the frame. Have you committed a robbery at this point?
He never saw me do it. Never knew it was happening. I have not committed a robbery.
Have you used any force or fear?
Nope.
He took it without me knowing, did not use any force or fear, therefore it's just a theft. Alex, if prosecuted for theft of this thermometer, is looking at a misdemeanor with 6 months maximum. Most likely he's going to get some form of community service and potentially even diversion. But let's imagine a slightly different scenario. I'm going to take this wonderful grilling thermometer, digital thermometer. I'm going to put it in my back pocket. I'm doing it mostly for the purposes of this illustration, but also because the thermometer is getting hot in the sun and I don't want it to go bad before it's time to check the chicken. Now, Alex is going to do something that's going to make me a little uncomfortable. I'm adjusting the thermometer. Look what he's doing. At this point, he has used force, although thankfully not a great deal of it, to physically remove this item from my possession. Alex, at this point, has committed a crime of robbery because he used force in order to steal an object. This is a common scenario that we see with purse snatching, wallet snatching, and other types of items that are physically removed. Now, he does not have to use actual force in order to acquire this thermometer. He could also threaten me. Alex, give us an example.
I need the thermometer, I got a barbecue going on, and I need to get back to my family. If you don't give it to me, I'm going to punch you in the face.
I guess I better give it back to him.
Thank you.
Okay? At this point, Alex didn't use force. He used a threat. He threatened that he would punch me. I believed that he would, and so I relinquished my interest in the thermometer, and Alex has now accomplished the crime of robbery, earning himself a potentially 5-year maximum in state prison, the California Department of Corrections, a violent strike, and an 85% requirement of serving that sentence, meaning he would have to serve 85% of that sentence in a CDCR. Okay, and that's a big difference between what we saw earlier as a simple theft. But now, we're going to explain what happens in California with its unique subspecies of robberies, known as Estes Robbery. Commonly, an Estes Robbery is something that we see in commercial setting. For example, a group of kids doing a beer run. They will come into the store, they will try to grab the beers, and then they will try to run out. The security guard, a owner, or an employee is going to say, "Wait, man, what are you doing? Get back here."
Hey, man, leave me alone.
At this point, should I try to grab Alex and Alex use any degree of force?
Hey, man, get off of me.
In this example, Alex just used force in order to prevent me from retaking of the beers that he was trying to steal, and he has committed a robbery known as Estes Robbery. So if somebody is trying to reclaim possession of the property that has been stolen from them, and in the course of the owner or the agent of the owner reclaiming possession of the property is defended, that too is a robbery with exactly the same criminal exposure and same seriousness of the charge. And we see that a lot, do we not, Alex, in retail settings, right?
Many retail settings because of the shopkeeper's privilege. The store owner or their employees, and many people know, and maybe many people have heard, that there's not going to be something that happens. Nobody's going to chase you, or they're not allowed to chase you. That doesn't matter. That aside, at the end of the day, if you're at a retail store, or someone's at a retail store, and they're leaving with merchandise, and they're being stopped or told to stop by one of the retailers, and there's some type of struggle, as we described, that may now have risen to an Estes robbery, and that's why it's important to get an attorney that understands the law.
Also important to know that it doesn't have to be a physical struggle by itself. You could also use a threat. Just like Alex in the earlier example used the threat, hey man, I'm going to punch you in the face. If you use a threat in order to stop the shopkeeper from reclaiming their property, you are committing the crime of robbery, even if there is never a physical touch.
Even if the store doesn't have a policy as to whether or not the person can chase you, it's not something to think about. If they chase you and there's a struggle, there may be a problem.
So the best thing to do, if you are ever in a position where you've made the judgment call, you obviously are committing a crime of theft, you shouldn't be doing that. But if you are caught while you're committing the crime of theft, the absolute worst thing you can do, which comes as a very natural human reaction to most people, is to fight back, to stop the person from reclaiming the property. If you do that, you're going to turn your low-level misdemeanor shoplifting into a very serious offense of second-degree robberies, and you're going to be exposing yourself to a 5-year sentence at 85% in the California Department of Correction. Oftentimes, in this second-degree robbery setting, we see a lot of folks who are unfortunately struggling with substance abuse issues, mental health issues. Oftentimes, you could have a person who is transient, who is unhoused or homeless. They go into the store, they're trying to grab something. And because these folks constantly live in a state of hypervigilance, constantly have to look out for somebody that's going to come and hurt them, mistreat them. Oftentimes, when I get clients like that, Alex, I see a lot of resistance towards the shopkeeper, towards the agent of the store owner, and that gets my clients in a lot of serious trouble.
Right, without ever really realizing that they've now made the problem a lot worse. They think maybe throwing the items down or just leave me alone, end it here, doesn't necessarily end it there.
Yeah.
It creates a bigger problem.
And leave me alone is not so much of a problem, but man, I'm going to fucking kill you, man. Once it rises to a threat, then it becomes a robbery, because either threat or fear gets you to a point where you're going to be in jail facing some very serious charges.
Right. And that simple little theft, which could be taken care of with diversion or, like you said, has now become a bigger issue.
So what do you do, Alex, when you have a client who is dealing with a serious situation like that? Let's say you have a client who is caught on camera, because almost all of these stores now have high-definition security cameras. So let's say you have a client caught on camera, doing a beer run, struggling with the security guard or mousing off threats to a security guard. Now your client's in custody, bail is high, the DA's offer is going to be midterm. Okay, Mr. Martin, your client is caught on camera, he has no defense, it's a 3-year offer. What do you do?
Well, I started looking at the actual facts of what happened. How much aggression did my client use? Obviously, their history is going to matter. Whether or not they've done this before, what kind of acts they've done before. But assuming it's someone that doesn't have much of a violent behavior, what actually was the target? And Estes robbery deals with the fact that it now becomes a robbery because you resisted so hard or you used that threat afterwards. But what was the initial intent? I think those facts are very important, because once you start to see that the person really just came in for X, and it may just be some small necessary item for the day, the why that came afterwards, the violence afterwards, may not be as important. So there's different ways to look at a robbery, and there may be other resolutions that aren't so highly penalized with a strike consequence, prison commitment. It could be some type of other charge below.
So that's interesting how you're looking at it, and obviously you're trying to understand the facts. So I do something similar, but I use a slightly different approach. I know I've shared it with you in our prior recordings, but I have this approach that I have developed at the firm where basically we're using a 3-step method, where we, number one, look at the underlying reasons for a client's behavior. Number two, once we know why something happened, for example, the person was schizophrenic, voices were telling him to go and get, the gas lamp and the tire iron and the kitchen knife, whatever. Or the person is badly addicted to drugs. He was stealing in order to sell it so he could buy more drugs. Or the person is homeless. He's hungry. He is doing it for survival. So once we identify what the underlying reason is for the alleged criminal behavior, we then try to identify, well, what would be the solution that we need in order to make sure this doesn't happen. So in the case of a client who's mentally ill, obviously we want to stabilize this individual on medication. If we're dealing with somebody who's, for example, in a state of psychosis, for hearing voices, bipolar, manic, whatever the case might be. In the case of a client who is severely addicted to drugs or alcohol or both, we obviously want to make sure that we introduce some sort of treatment, some sort of sobriety. Oftentimes, the incarceration that's going to happen in the beginning might provide us with some forced sobriety, and therefore some opportunity to do better, to find an inpatient program for this individual, outpatient program, things like that. If we're dealing with an individual who is unhoused, who is disconnected from their family, chances are there is a mental health issue somewhere there that caused the break, and usually it's the family members who are calling us once they realize their loved one is in jail with serious charges. And so once we identify the underlying reason for a person's behavior, once we identify what solution will treat the underlying reason so that this problem will not reoccur again, then we engage in what I call targeted solution advocacy, where we basically incorporate that solution into our proposed resolution of the case. So the way it would look in my negotiation with the prosecutors, I would say, okay, Mr. Prosecutor, I completely understand that the store employee was really scared that our client may have punched him as he was trying to run out with these items. However, what really happened in this case is this is an individual who's suffering from underlying mental health issues. He has been off his medication. He left his home about 9 months ago. Family has completely lost touch with him. And so now that he's stable on medication, he's on antipsychotic, he's completely shocked by his behavior. We have a long-term treatment program for this individual so that if he were to go into this program, this kind of thing would not happen. This is what the program would look like. So why don't we treat the real reason for the behavior and not just its symptom? Why don't we allow this gentleman to petition, for example, for mental health diversion? Or if for some reason that approach is not possible, perhaps we can work out a reduction of a charge by breaking the robbery into its subcomponents. A theft and an assault, both are reducible to misdemeanors down the road, both make him probation eligible, and we can incorporate a lot of mental health treatment, substance abuse treatment, whatever other terms and conditions into the terms of probation or diversion. Person could apologize to the owner of the store, pay for the damages. Restitution is always a huge factor, and it could really help you bring the objections from the victim and victim's family way down if the people understand that, for example, somebody from a good family, just a lost human soul, somebody who fell off track, lost their way, started using drugs, developed mental health issues, but is now stable. So in some ways, getting caught for this incident was a blessing in disguise, because now they're able to do things that will make sure that something like this never happens. So this is how I treat it.
How do you deal with the prosecutor who is now presenting you with pictures or surveillance of blood or medical records indicating the damage that this victim, this shopkeeper, has now endured?
Yeah, in a case where a lot of force was used, you were saying?
Right.
Yeah, if we're dealing with a case where a lot of force is used, I think it's really important to not diminish the extent of harm that was caused. Yeah, exactly. Especially if you're dealing with a mental health case. If you're dealing with a case involving substance abuse, it doesn't really do you any good to belittle the person who was affected. I think it's super important to acknowledge the amount of harm that was done and to use that to request other alternatives. For example, long-term mental health treatment. Hey, this is something we never want to happen again. Let's make sure we treat the real problem, the real underlying reason for this behavior, so nobody else ever gets hurt. You're not going to incarcerate this person for life. If you don't treat their issues, if they come out of prison just as badly addicted, just as messed up psychologically, you're going to see another person, another store victimized. Why are we doing that? Let's return a human being to their position in our society where they can be a well-functioning, contributing member of the society and not a drain on its resources.
Do you ever look at a case and think this is a lost cause?
Never. I don't believe in lost causes. You know, years ago, you and I worked together in a public defender's office in Tulare County. And I don't know if you remember, but there was a really brilliant lawyer She wasn't always appreciated. I think maybe it was just the personality differences that she had with people. But I've had tremendous respect for her. Her name was Lisa. And Lisa told me when I was a young lawyer something that I think is extremely dangerous to say to a young lawyer like me. She said, William, any case can be won.
Wow.
And any case can be lost. And Alex, I never forgot that. And so oftentimes when I'm looking at a case, I look at it kind of like a puzzle. I know that there is a right answer. I just have to find it.
Is there a right answer always?
Yeah.
There is.
I think so.
Is there only one?
But say it again?
Is there only one?
No, sometimes there are multiple answers. Sometimes you have to pick between the different answers that you have and find the best ones. Sometimes you think something is the best answer. Your client might disagree. That happens too.
What do you do in that scenario?
You try to convince your client to do the best thing for them.
Based on your knowledge.
Based on your knowledge and experience and what you think is absolutely the best long-term solution. Sometimes I argue with people over it. And then there comes a point where if you're, at some point, if you're done, you're done,
Do you think emotions have any place in the law?
Yes. I think, regretfully, what happens... Oh, yeah. Thanks, man. I think, regretfully, what happens is oftentimes we underestimate the extent to which emotions play a role in the law and in practice of law. And I think that's to our client's detriment. I think sometimes we really have to understand how different parties to the case feel. How does the victim feel? What kind of pressure is the district attorney under now that you have a bludgeon storekeeper who
just went to work that day expecting to work a 6 to 8 to 10 hour shift, and they were just going to go home and maybe barbecue. And now they had to go to the hospital and endured some bills and endured some restitution. You consider that?
Absolutely. I think you need to understand everyone's perspective and everyone's position. And once you understand exactly why people feel the way they feel, so it's really it's a variation on the method that I use. Really, it all comes down to asking the question why. Works great for my 3-step method.
Why?
It also works. Why did this happen? Why does so and so feel the way they feel? Why is my district attorney so dug in on this particular
position?
position?
Having a mental health episode? Were they just completely erratic and somebody from society just needed to help them, and they went in and took a bottle of aspirin? Maybe they thought they had the money, maybe they didn't, and then decided to get out of my way and fight on the way out. But how did their day start off? It may have started off as being their last day, and this may have been the actual thing that is the red flag. Like, everyone says, if there was only a sign, this was the sign. Unfortunately, the law doesn't like violence. The law doesn't like that type of atmosphere.
More so, our judges don't like it, and they are under a lot of pressure, oftentimes political pressure, because it is an elected position after all. And so whenever you have cases where folks are hurt, folks are injured, it becomes a lot harder to obtain the necessary relief. So I think it's your job as a lawyer to educate the judicial officer to say, look, Your Honor, I completely understand the conduct was completely, unacceptable in this case, but it is because of that it is so much more important to diagnose the underlying problem and provide accurate solution. Now, that's not to say that you don't have factual defenses to a crime of robbery.
Right.
For example, your client may not have been defending himself from the storekeeper for the purpose of keeping the property. Sometimes the shopkeepers or loss prevention officers get really violent.
They overstep. They may think that somebody has taken an item, and there may be a confrontation because of that.
Or they might be using a lot of force. I had a client once who was a victim of sexual assault. She was a survivor of rape. She gets confronted outside of Walmart after committing a shoplift by 2 really violent loss prevention officers, and she got triggered. She thought she was going to get raped again.
And the situation got escalated.
Yeah, it really escalated. They were using a lot of force to detain her over nothing, over items that are worth a few bucks. And this girl got triggered. She had a flashback, and she thought she was getting raped again. So I think in the situation where a person is not really using force to accomplish theft, but is using force to defend themselves from the force being used on them, you got an argument. If there is no intent to steal, obviously you have a defense. If you are under mistaken belief in that you have a right to that property.
Maybe you thought it was yours. Maybe you thought you paid for it.
Exactly.
There's times where you just didn't, especially now when you have to check out your own items.
Or if you thought your friend was paying for it and you're just walking out and suddenly a security guard jumps on you and you're fighting them off. But more significantly, you need to really think it through, and it's super important that if you start out with a theft, you don't end up in jail on the charge of robbery, because a lot of lawyers really give up. I think a lot of lawyers lose hope when they see a crime that's committed on video. A lot of people are really unimaginative, lazy also, I would say. And so you end up with a case where, I could say, hey, Alex, what do you want me to do, man? You are on video stealing beer.
That's it.
You are on video
Case
stealing
closed.
the thermometer right from my pocket. My Ring camera just captured it. I'm not a magician. I'm just a lawyer. What do you want me to do, man?
Right.
You were looking at a 5-year charge. I got you 2 years in prison. You're done, man.
Right.
Next time, don't steal on camera.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will feel that way. And that's the difference between lazy, unimaginative thinking and somebody who's going to say, no, we are not going to send this human being to prison for 2 years over a thermometer. We're going to try and find out what was it that caused Alex
Can we
to
make
do
it
something
better?
like this. Can we make it better? Can we improve it? Is there a mental health issue? Is there a substance abuse issue?
Restitution can be paid, as you.
Can there be restitution paid? Can we reach out to the victim to see what the real issue is that's causing them to be so upset?
Because at the end of the day, nobody's going to life in prison for stealing a thermometer. So this person has to go back into society. Better now to train them than to wait for the prison system to take over.
I agree. But, some people do go to prison for that. You could have a really horrible record. The prosecutor is happy that they finally caught you on something. You got multiple strikes.
True.
Now this is a robbery. That's a strike 2. And the 3-strike sentence gets triggered. And if you end up in a particular jurisdiction, because some jurisdictions are much more conservative about these types of things, you could have the district attorney electing to prosecute somebody on this weak robbery with an idea of getting a life sentence, because what they're doing is they're picking a charge to fit the bad person who they want to put away,
Right.
as opposed to prosecuting the person for the conduct they've actually committed. With that, Alex, you and I got to bring this chicken over to the party. But to wrap up, I want to give our viewers a list of short suggestions, things that they can do in the event that they're in the situation where they're being accused of a robbery, Estes robbery, something like that, to help them out. So what would you say is your number one suggestion?
Stay calm, because if you don't stay calm, you could make the problem worse.
I would say number 2, do not speak to the police or the loss prevention. Never sign any papers that the loss prevention wants you to sign. They're not going to let you walk out of the store. You're already detained. You are going to be arrested for this. But if you signed something that acknowledges that you stole these items, if you sign some kind of promise to pay back, to never come back, you're going to make it easier for your attorney to prove that maybe something else took place, because now we're going to have to deal with an admission or a confession.
Right. And at the end of the day, if it's something simple that can be explained away, that's something you may look into. But you have the right to just remain silent. If it's starting to get bad, let your lawyer figure it out later. Don't make the problem worse by adding information to them and spinning it their way.
No one's ever gotten into more trouble for speaking less. On the other hand, thousands of our clients have gotten into a lot more trouble for saying things they shouldn't have said when all they had to do was just remain silent.
Agreed.
I would also add to that, Alex, and I think you'll agree with me, that if you are caught doing something stupid but minimal in nature, like committing a theft, in that moment, the very best thing you can do when caught is just let go. Surrender fully, go and allow yourself to get detained. Worst case scenario, you're going to have to pay back for the item. You might be dealing with a misdemeanor shoplifting charge, but if you fight back, if you resist, if you make threats, you're going to make a bad situation really, really horrible. And you're going to be looking at some very serious charges, like the charge of second-degree robbery under the Estes case.
Agree completely.
And then finally, if you do find yourself in trouble, make sure you find yourself a really good lawyer so that you're not going to get cooked and your case is not going to get cooked. Instead, what you're going to end up with is a very well-prepared defense, or I suppose in our situation, really well-prepared chicken. There you go. Please click like, subscribe, join our channel. We look forward to bringing more interesting videos to you. Thank you.